one-hand flosser. And it's slow enough where, you know, people putting on their makeup, people shaving. I had chicken for dinner last night.
You know, if you're tired of the traffic in LA, you can always take the bus if you have a day and a half to get to work.
Oh, I've used transit.
Josh actually gave his car away and used public transit for over a year, but it turned out the bus was even slower than driving.
The transit out here is stuck in the traffic.
So Josh eventually bought another car. Josh lives only 16 miles from work, but it often takes him an hour and a half to get to the office. At the end of the day, it's the same fight to get back home, 3 hours a day. No one should have to live like this. You've got to find a way to speed up Josh's commute.
What would you do about traffic if you were in Los Angeles?
If you're in Los Angeles, I think we're pretty much screwed.
I think people use the gas pedal more, and they pull all the way up to the bumper in front of them.
On the John and Ken show, I suggested other ways to bust congestion, like letting private companies pay for roads.
Well, how would that help?
Well, first of all, taxpayers would have to pay for the road. Like I was talking to somebody from the Reason Foundation at dinner, and they go, what do you do some place like the Bonwats? And he goes, just a double decker. And I go, who's gonna pay? So just let a private company do it. They can charge people to ride down the road, get a fast pass, and you pay $5.
Sure, the top deck could be for the
Yeah, yeah. And if you're privatizing, you'd have different companies bidding. You know, I would love that on the freeway in LA. You know? Yeah.
Maybe the Drew Carey Freeway would look something like this snazzy double-deck toll road in Tampa, Florida. Or maybe I'd build my road underground. Here's a tunnel that's being built in Paris. Tunnels that run underneath Australian cities help people get around town. The private sector paid for all these.
Life would be much happier without the congestion.
So let's build the Josh Lipton Tunnel. Double-deck one of the freeways he uses. Or hey, how about building some special express lanes like the one accountant Cedric Allen uses?
Oh, this piece of paper, this is the billing statement for using the 91 Express Lane. 168 total trips, valued at a cost of $548. Which people see that and go, wow, you spend that much?
The 91 Express Lanes isn't your typical toll road. A private company built it in the middle of the 91 freeway in Orange County, California. The express lanes run right next to the regular lanes, so drivers can choose to use them or not. And you don't have to stop at toll booths. Tolls are collected electronically from this gadget that hangs overhead. When traffic gets bad, the price of the toll rises. The OCTA owns the 91 Express Lanes. Here's spokesman Ted Wynn.
The average toll is about $2.76. The low end is about $1.50, and the high end is about $9.50.
Sounds pricey, but each day about 40,000 people pay the toll because the special lanes let them zoom past the slow-moving traffic.
Mailman Demetrius Mikes battles through congestion on his way home, but once he hits the express lanes, his commute speeds right up.
To me, it seems about an hour and a half to 2 hours.
Traffic often keeps parents from picking up kids at daycare on time. Imagine paying $5 for each minute you're late. Cedric knows all about that.
On an average week, we would have probably spend about $40 per child, times 3, that's $120 a week for being a few minutes.
$120 a week. Once he started using the express lanes, Cedric almost never had to pay late fees, so paying a little can end up saving you a lot of money and time.
With the extra time, I do my schoolwork, talk to my son, just time to relax.
Have more time to prepare a decent meal, have more time to spend with the family, and possibly even get on a movie before going to bed.
Unpredictable traffic makes it hard for Josh to make plans even with his wife, but with an express lane, he can always make it home in time for dinner.
The 91 toll expressways. I think that's a great idea.
So let's see, express lanes, tunnels, double-deckers, anything else we can do to get Josh home fast?
There has to be some other way to travel. Like, they should use the air.
Use the air?
Hey man, I'm Drew. Nice to see you. How are you? Hey, you ready for the easiest way to work you ever had in your life?
Yeah, so far.
Yeah, come on, follow me. The helicopter doesn't crash. Your last purchase over funeral if it does.
This is the way to go. I gotta get my truck set up to do this every day. You're traveling for it. Traveling down the beach, slow. Traveling. Check it out the road.
So, that was a blast, huh? Yeah, exactly.
At the end of the day, Josh rode the chopper back home.
See ya.
So long, 90-minute commute.
My commute, only 9 minutes. I had no idea what it even looked like in my neighborhood at 5 p.m. Gonna go inside, have some dinner with my wife. It's the greatest thing, thanks a lot.
Such a happy ending. Or is it? We can't keep flying Josh to work, so it's back to the gridlock grind for him first thing tomorrow. Now we could build some express lanes, tunnels, and double-deckers. Taxpayers wouldn't even have to pay for it. Then Josh, bus riders, and other commuters could escape congestion every day. And hey, if we can beat gridlock in LA, we could beat it anywhere.
But if you live in Los Angeles as long as I have, you really shouldn't have much hope. It's okay though, it's not a helicopter. For Reason.tv, I'm Drew Carey, and I'm out of here in a helicopter. Holy shit!
video kind of gets us thinking about some of the issues in this chapter. I guess before I get started today again, picking up on traffic, I just sent out an email. I'm going to circulate this around the room. We're still not all the way caught up, but there's quite a few of your late work and stuff, so that this better reflects your midterm grade, and we should have the rest of it done by hopefully tomorrow. But I've kind of promised you, or I promised myself, I wanted to get, I can't remember if I promised you or not, I might have, Thursday or Friday, but I wanted to get you something today. So you guys can look it over. Highest score in the class, 95.67%. Nice. Lowest score, all in the middle. Low scores again is because you're not doing your homework or you haven't done your late work yet. So there's still lots of time to get that late work in. You're basically, if you do your crap, you'll get 80% back. So get in there and do it. So if you got any questions about your grades individually, make sure you come in and talk to me. We got the paper coming up. So let's go ahead and talk about that too, I guess. Oops. So it's on your syllabus, which maybe I'll just pull that. I think I have your syllabus somewhere in here. I think your Mod 8 has the final paper too. Yeah, this section here. So jack this up a little bit. Okay, whoops. You guys aren't even looking at anything. Okay. So 6 to 8 pages. You need to find some scholarly work. What does that mean? Professional academic journals. You can also have some popular media in there as well, but you need to find some popular or some journals. And so there's a resource called the JSTOR that is not available. What did I say on this thing? Finally, which can be accessed through Miners Library. Many of these sources can also be found at the JSTOR. See the week one materials for information regarding JSTOR. So, okay, I couldn't remember what was on this particular thing. So I have an account with JSTOR. JSTOR is basically a company. I think it's a nonprofit company, but nonetheless, you have to pay an annual fee, and it's kind of expensive for our little Ottawa University Library to be a member of. And so it's kind of not in the budget, so to speak, at this point. They hope to do that. Actually, once we bring on the DBA, I think they're looking to have that be part of the cost, is getting that, which would give you guys access too. So I am, let's see, I gotta remember how to do this here. I think I'm going to carelessly, accidentally, let's see, what is it again? This may work as a login to that. When you log in, do not download journal articles. You will have full access to the full library, but I only have a certain amount of downloads I can do. So don't download it to your machine, but you can view everything 100% on the browser when you do it. So that gives you, this JSTOR has the most economics journals in it. It has other journals from other disciplines, by the way, too. But there's some journals that specialize in, real estate and some of the other stuff that we do in this class. Andrew.
Is that 11?
Yes, this is 11. Yeah, 1 at the end here. I kind of ran out of room. Yes. And this is my YouTube channel, Russ Econ Rock. So that should do the trick for you. And if you have any problems, I'm trying to think if maybe it's a cap R. So here, let me just do a little. Let me log into my account. Nobody look. So this is the little icon for JSTOR. Oops. I'm gonna do my own thing. All right, boom, we're in. So now we're trying to be a big happy family in here. So once you can save your searches and you can create your own little file. Let me see if I can do this. Workspace. Oops, let's not do that one. Purchase history. What's this workspace? Ah, there we go. All right, so there's Aaron, Brady, Claudio, Eddie, Jeffrey. So you guys can make your own little folder, and then when you click the Russ folder, or let's do the Russ folder. Then these are items that I save for this spatial economics paper, right? So you guys did your own search, you looked for whatever your topic is, and you can kind of save them to a subfolder. Just put your first name on it. And these are some students that have used it before. So there's the create subfolder, and then you can just put your first name and you'll have it. Okay, any questions?
Was that a capital R or lowercase?
Capital R. So, oh, thank you. I didn't put it on there. No, that's this one. Okay, so do not log in now. We got lots of work to do. So, one place that you can go for tips, so let's say you want to do something on, I don't know, zoning regulations. So if you guys have not gone to Google Scholar, that is a nice place to start, maybe even before JSTOR. So Google Scholar is a search engine that restricts itself to scholarly articles made by professors and other scientists, all kinds of disciplines. It could be chemistry or whatever. So Google Scholar is kind of a good place to look, because then when you do zoning, you're not going to get some magazine that's talking about zoning laws in Kansas City or something, right? This is going to be a professional journal. So zoning, let's do zoning regulations. Maybe you've got a topic like that, and then you get a whole bunch of hits, and you start saying, oh, okay, measuring the effects of zoning regulations. That may or may not be an economics journal, so you kind of have to be aware of that. But it does tell you the journal. It also gives you the easy citation. So if you do cite for this journal, the economic theory of zoning, a critical review. Ooh, that sounds interesting. Okay, so we're going to cite this thing. We're using APA. So that's the proper citation to use. You can cut and paste and put it into your reference list. So that's an easy way to get things going. And then otherwise you can click into it. I don't want you to pay for any stuff. So, oh, this one happened to be JSTOR. Look at that. Okay, so if you didn't have these credentials, that wouldn't have opened up for you, because this is a pay site, right? So this one happened to be a JSTOR article, and now you've got the full article. You can look, maybe it's relevant for your thing, maybe it's not relevant for your thing, but you can save then, if you hit the save button, and then you can create your folder, a subfolder that says Bryce, and save the document so that you can start collecting a few of them. Another helpful tip, oh wow, we even got a supply and demand. What's that one? I don't want to waste time on that. Okay. Ooh, a production possibilities frontier too. Ooh, that looked familiar. Gosh, this one's rich. Look at that. Land rent. This is the whole dealio that we've gone over. I'm trying to get to the reference page. Oh, there we go. So here is a really helpful tip. If you find one article that seems really close to the topic that you're studying, maybe read the front introduction. I wouldn't go through and read all of the article. I would read the first, either the abstract, there's always an abstract with it, or the introduction, and say, oh, yeah, this is cool, I like this topic, this seems to be relevant to the topic I was trying to hit at, and then go straight to the references. When you look at the references, you're going to have a bunch of other articles that may or may not be related to the thing you're really trying to drill down on. So it's an easy way to build up a bunch of articles for your topic. And you only need 4 as the minimum, but of course you can have more. Any questions on that? Yes?
So like housing integration in a specific city would be a decent topic?
Anything related to the class, yeah. Any of the chapter material. And so we're still going to get to finish up the congestion today, and then we're going to get into crime tomorrow. So that's on the that's kind of a fun topic too. And then everything else. So yeah, it can be, and sometimes you might have topics that are too narrow or too specific. So so here, the title page, this kind of gives all the guts of it, but that's the gist of it. This is called a literature review paper. So literature review means you've looked at some professionals that are experts in this area, and this is what they had to say about your topic of zoning or congestion or crime or whatever. Okay, any other questions? Yeah?
When is this final paper going to be due?
Sunday. A week from this Sunday.
I was like, okay.
A week from this Sunday. And so I do want you guys to get your topics in next week so that we've got a good idea of that. Probably by Tuesday, I'd like to review your topics. So pick a topic. And for the topic exercise, I want you to submit at least 2 scholarly references. At least 2. Just so I know that you've got a topic. What was the one you just said, Jacob?
Housing integration.
Housing integration. Whatever your topic is, I don't care what it is. What I want to see is that you went and did your Google Scholar. Like, has anybody ever written about housing integration? Maybe the professional world thinks of housing integration differently than the way you're thinking about housing integration, right? So I kind of want you guys to grapple through that first stage of refining your topic and making sure that there's some sort of academic support. This is not your capstone project, so the purpose of it is not for you to kind of write a whole full-blown research paper, but rather to just survey what professionals have said about your particular topic. Anything else? Okie doke. So, let's see where we left off. Oh, Carlos had asked, are we doing chapter 23 before we're doing 20? The answer is yes. That was not a typo. So, chapter 23 is on crime, and chapter 20 is on zoning regs. So I've gone out of the textbook order in the way we're going to tackle that. So don't let that fool you. We got chapter 23 coming up too. That's what we're going to hit. Possibly today, but we might get into a little bit of it otherwise tomorrow. All right, so let me back up to this one. This is what we left off with roughly yesterday, thinking about maybe adding toll roads or congestion taxes or something. You know, what happens with the growth of the city? So people, that's going to make their lives a little bit better, so that shifted up the utility curve, and then the question was, is the city going to grow or shrink? And so with that shift from the model we did before, the city with it was going to see growth, which is going to cause their utility to fall from their initial level J down to C, and the existing city that didn't have it is actually going to see some growth in utility as they shrink though, right? So the other starter city is going to go from I to N. All right, so how about peak versus off-peak? When is peak time in Kansas City or your town that you live in? What are the peak travel times? 4:30 to 6, and what about in the morning? 7 maybe, but for sure usually 8, but 7 to 9, somewhere in there, right? So each city can be a little bit different, but it's usually when you go to work, you've got all the people going to work and the people coming home from work. The rest of the day is usually not too bad, although there can be times for the big Chiefs game or something else to where there could be traffic too. So this little thing here is just talking about, well, what's the difference between peak time and off-peak time? So remember, the model is we would normally be consuming out here where the private cost of the trip equals the demand, the marginal benefit of the trip. And so this is where the market would be doing. And so in response to that, we can have a price you have to pay to be on the road at different times. So what this is highlighting is that the way this technology works with congestion, the incremental cost is getting bigger as more cars hit the road, right? And that's what we saw with that table of numbers as well. And so we can have variable pricing like Drew Carey said on that video, to when off-peak pricing might be a little bit less versus peak pricing, which would be more. And so a variable pricing model would make things more efficient as well. Okay, questions or comments, sir? All right, so here we're going to just look at the gain from doing each one. So here's the tax. If we charge you a toll or a trip cost, then that's going to raise your cost at the margin. And that'll be the amount of the tax that would do it, giving us kind of the supply with the tax and the demand, and that brings our levels down to, the author's calling it VE for like the efficient level, right? The efficient level of traffic. All right, so then who gets helped and who gets screwed? Or does anybody get screwed? So there's some people that are going to keep driving on the road. Do they get screwed? Jameson.
No, they're paying a tax, they're driving on it, that they don't.
Okay, and especially if they were willing to pay $9. So here we have somebody on the road, the V double prime driver. Somebody was willing to pay $9. They got $9 worth of benefit to drive on the road, right? And so they got $9 worth of benefit, and then they would have gotten some consumer surplus. So what this thing does here is unpacks for us, what is that driver getting? So once the tax is implemented, remember we started here with no taxes and a lot of congestion. And so when we implement the tax is this $2.40 is the amount of the congestion tax. And so when that's done, that immediately takes some drivers off the road. So for me, who's still driving, I used to be stuck in traffic with my car idling and guzzling gas and my time costs. Remember, we had our lost opportunity cost of time. So just that alone is giving me an 80 cents benefit for this V double prime consumer. And then they're paying the tax, so all in all, they have the $6.40 worth of cost. The total tax to them is the $2.40, but they gain the 80 cents back. But then we also talked about the thing that I think happens in theory, but not probably in practice very much, and that is if there's an offsetting benefit to tax reduction in another area. So with this model, though, and by the way, this is just right out of your textbook, the author is saying there could be a $2 tax refund from another tax that kicks in. And so how they do it is, and he puts some numbers in with, suppose there was at V star, there was 600 drivers, and at VE, there's 500 drivers. And there's a tax of $2.40. So when we put in the tax, we have less drivers that are paying the tax, but the government's still collecting some money. How much? Well, they're collecting the 500 drivers that are still on the road times 240. So 500 times 240, T times VE, equals $1,200. I only know this, I'm not doing that in my head. I wish I could do that fast, but I just kind of I reviewed my notes before we came in here. So that's $1,200 worth of tax. So in theory, the government's getting $1,200 of tax, so they could give a tax rebate or refund back to all the 600 people who were paying it before. So the refund could be 1,200 divided by the 600 consumers before, gives you a $2 refund. So that's part of what he's doing here, saying, well, in theory, if we have an offsetting tax refund from this new tax, then there's still some benefit even to the high value driver. With the time savings and everything else, it all kind of offsets. Questions or comments there? What about this guy? What's happening to this driver? When we had no congestion, we were at 600 drivers. What about the 550th driver? What's that person doing now with the congestion tax? What happened to them? Were they driving before the tax? Yes. Now what are they doing? Once a toll road was added, what are they doing?
Like half the time.
They're doing it half the time, or they're not driving. They're taking side roads or something, maybe if we're in a toll road situation. So they're doing something different. So they're not driving. So did they get screwed? So this person here, the V prime that was the 550th driver or 560th driver or whatever, what happened with them? Well, they lost some consumer surplus because when they were allowed on the road, they were getting consumer surplus here, but everybody lost this amount. So this driver, this particular driver, using the numbers that the author did here, lost 70 cents. So they lost 70 cents, but they gained $2 because of the tax reduction over here, the tax refund. So they ended up having net gain overall with that setup of this $1.30. Bryce.
Okay, I see how this works in theory, but wouldn't they actually just get screwed like in real life because they're not going to get a tax break just because they, you know what I'm saying?
Well, we're again, this is a little bit on the theoretical side, but the economist here, in theory, is saying 600 people are on the road right now. How could I reorganize things and make life better? By leaving people neutral in terms of their, or leaving the government neutral in terms of tax collection. So the government's still going to collect $1,200 either way. I can reorganize it with a per unit tax and a reduction of the old tax, such that this driver who used to be able to use the road, but now was bumped off, is still getting the $2 benefit. Now, for practical purposes, I totally agree. Like this is where economists kind of, the model, and I shouldn't say economists, it's the model, right? So the model is maybe too simplified. But it does give us some insight that we now know we are kicking somebody off the road, but if there was an offsetting refund of some sort, they wouldn't be necessarily harmed, right? So it kind of gives us, and then you could get into politics and the practical side of, well, maybe we should do this or this way or this way or that way. But at least we have something to go off of in theory that says there could be a benefit. All right. So here's some real world taxes that they do. So Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, and London. So tax per mile, peak and off-peak. So there's pretty dramatic differences. L.A. down to 3 cents, 21 cents in D.C. down to 2 cents. So economists and traffic engineers basically would help do this calculation. So there's the monitors we put on the road of how many people are actually using the road, right? So they got pretty good data, especially when it comes to toll roads, of what that would look like and what they'd need to price it at. Okay, so you saw on the video that there are different ways. How many of you have a Kansas K-tag? So a couple of you that might especially travel towards Manhattan or over to Topeka using the freeway. So different ways to identify and quickly get the bill. That one guy was paying $548 a month. Crazy to think that. But if he's making a couple $100,000, you know, what is that? $500 a month is how much? $6,000, and it's all just economics. There's no solutions, only trade-offs. To his world, that made sense. That $500 was pretty cheap to gain back the hour and a half, like he was saying. All right. And another thing that happens is you might be saying, well, yeah, that's the way life always is. It always helps out the rich. But how is the poor person impacted? Are they harmed by the rich person?
They're benefiting because now
There's less people on the congested one too, right? So it actually ends up creating less congestion the other way, short of some other things changing. So, okay, so what are they doing that's different than what other ways of trying to reduce taxes? They're just switching. So carpooling becomes more beneficial. The time, travel route, go on a side road, choose less congested, location choices. So all of those things kind of play into the picture of facing the traffic that you saw on the LA freeway that Drew carried. That was an old video too, but I think, as I can tell when I was there, it still looks about the same. Question?
Oh no, I was just gonna say, in California we have like carpool lanes, and I know people who like just make the economic decision to drive in the carpool lane because the one time that they get pulled over, the one ticket is worth the amount of time.
Yeah. Actually, we're going to get into that in this here too. And people put up dummies.
Yeah.
People have put up mannequins in the car seat next to them to try to fool it. So lots of things going that way. And then of course, yeah, then you have to decide, is it worth it to raise the fee, right? And then the fines can go up.
Oh, yeah.
So here it is here with.
I apologize.
No, that's fine. That's part of the topic here. So the carpooling incentive, a lot of cities do that. If you got at least 2 people or more in your car, then you can drive in the HOV lane. And then they do allow in some places, not all, but they'll have, you can pay to drive in the HOV lane with a permit. Like you can pay the $500 like the guy was doing, or whatever, some price to be a single person driving in the HOV lane. I think they try to avoid that though, because then it looks kind of bad, right? Like other drivers say, why does that guy get to drive? Oh, that guy's an a-hole, or why is he hogging up that road? So I think in general they try to avoid that because it's hard to see who's in there. Okay, so pricing. How does that happen then? So use a private builder and pricing for express lane. So in the video again, we saw that we can just let private investor do this. Why not let them build roads or toll roads, right? It doesn't have to be the government running it necessarily. So I believe the expressway between here and Topeka is privately owned, if I remember right. That is not the KDOT or whatever. They kind of help facilitate it. But it's not state-owned. Like, I think the upkeep of the roads is done privately. I'm not positive on that, but I think that's the way that one was done when it was built originally. They're pretty nice roads if you drive on them. They're like, oh, wow, this is nice. Well, welcome to the private sector and allowing a for-profit business to maybe upkeep it. So, so trip cost, again, demand high. We're just looking at the amount of the toll and how much needs to be paid. And then the business is just saying, okay, this road would cost me $10 billion to make, and I expect there to be X amount of traffic, and the toll revenue comes in. You're just running a business, right? Except you're doing it building roads, but nothing's really much different. That there's a cost, there's maintenance. When the snow falls, it's on the business to have to clean off that road or pay. They might pay the DOT or pay the county or the state something to clean it off. But yeah, it can be very much a private builder doing that. Okay, so latent demand. So the increase in volume from V triple to V prime, an example of a latent demand. A decrease in travel costs increases the number of travelers. So when we reduce the number, we might entice new people out, right? So there might be new demand that we didn't know existed until there was a change. So back to the story when we just kind of worked through, well, what about the poor person? So the rich people take the pay lane and the poor people are stuck here. Now there's less congestion here because the rich person went over here, but now that there's less congestion here, it attracts more people to that lane. That's the idea of a latent demand. So what if we use a gas tax? So why is a gas tax not fair? What does it miss the boat on? If we just put a tax on gasoline as opposed to doing a toll road or a congestion tax?
There's no choice in it. You're just stuck with the tax no matter if you would stay in the congested lane to avoid it or not.
Yeah. So in that way, it's kind of not fair, right? It's like, I never drive during peak hours anyway, but now I'm still paying the tax. So while it might address some things, it might not address others. So policymakers, maybe they're facing constraints that it's just too difficult to implement something. They're like, oh, well, what if we just tax gas? Maybe that'll at least help. Well, it might help, but it won't be as efficient as maybe other things that could be done. So with a gasoline tax, we're back to our supply and demand. So we just reduce the supply, and we got less people on the road, but it might not have the same effects that another one does. How can we estimate that? How can we estimate these moves? We're going to pull our bag of tricks out with elasticities again. So suppose the price elasticity of demand for gas is -1 and the price elasticity is 1. What would be the share of the burden of the tax to consumers or producers? So this question, let's start with consumers. We've got a 1 and a 1. And who remembers that formula from our homework we just did the other day? We had the fraction of the shares. I would say, look in your notes. Jacob, what are you saying? 0? What? Okay. What's your answer though? I don't know what this means. 0.
Based off of that formula.
Okay. Are you sure?
It's 0.5.
0.5. How'd you get that?
The formula.
Because what?
The formula it's.
The formula is what?
Elasticity of demand.
Okay.
Over absolute value of elasticity of demand plus elasticity of supply.
Okay. And we went over this before that the author changed to subtraction. And this, Andrew, this is what you brought up before, right? We got away from using absolute value by doing this minus.
Yeah.
So that elasticity of supply is always positive, and then it's minus a minus, so you're adding them together. So that the denominator has a 2, 1 plus 1, and the numerator has a 1. Now remember, the thing that says for demand, you actually use the elasticity of supply. So in this case, it's a half for both of them. So it's a 50-50 split. And so here, when the elasticity of supply and demand is both 1, then they're going to share the burden of the tax equally, right? 16 cents for the burden on the, is the price that they pay. What am I trying to do here? What, we had the split, we were down here, okay. So the amount of the tax was shifted up by that amount, and so we get a, what the heck? I don't know if I'm looking at this wrong or what, but. Okay, I don't know if the author is, this might have been an intermediate step, but let's put, supply, demand, what's the starting place? 4. So we're at G star and 4. And so if we have a 32-cent tax, 32-cent tax, we're going to move this up by 32 cents, supply with the tax. So there's that, according to what the book has. But how much is the supplier or the consumer, let's start with the consumer, how much are they actually going to pay? Or what? 16. Okay, so we got 416 is for the consumer. And what about the producer? Nope. Well, that's what they pay. Well, they're paying that, but what's the price effectively that they're paying? Producers. 4? No. 4 was here. So when the tax happens, let me go back to what the author has here. G star, G double star is this. How much is the producer actually getting after the tax?
Oh, get $4.
Nope. $4 was the old amount before the tax.
Oh, 132. It would be
384. What? 384. So remember how this tax stuff works is that the producer tries to pass the tax off to the consumer by charging $432, but they can't because at $432 there is excess supply, and so they're forced to reduce the price. They reduce the price to $416, so that's the price the consumer pays. But then how much do they give government? How much do they give government? 32 cents. So the amount of the tax is 32 cents, leaving everybody $3.84. And so the consumer burden of the tax is half of what the total amount that the government's collecting. So tax revenue equals 32 cents times G double star. That would be the tax revenue. Consumers are paying 16 cents of it, half of it, and the producers are paying half of it. Okay, so I think one of your homework problems is going to have you do this part. That's why I wanted to bring that up. You're going to have to, this picture wasn't, the author kind of did this part, but not that part. All right, so that's your formula for the consumers. The producers, you would put the elasticity of demand up here. So that was the thing that was a little counterintuitive. Okay, what about pollution? Get those cars, get some electric vehicles going. So there's all the pollutants. Awful greenhouse gases. We're going to all choke and die we don't get to carbon zero in 3 minutes, we're all gonna die. Okay, so what's the economic approach? Is to internalize the externality. That's what we did with that's why we did a congestion tax, is that we're trying to get the people who are actually doing the problem, right? That's what internalizing the externality does. And so we'd want to tax that at external cost, but we'd also want to tax the people who are actually doing it. So monitoring devices for emissions would be some approaches. Not going to help very much if we just do a one-time tax. How about death? How about people getting broken legs and have to have a surgery? Those are some costs with cars and roads. So 3.1 million injuries, 40,000 people croaked because of a motor vehicle accident. And we're estimating their lives at $300 billion. Little did you know it, you thought life was worth infinity, but an economist can put a dollar value on it.
Where do they get it?
You can look at like lost income and stuff over time. So when you get into lawsuits, there's economists that will estimate what is the value to the wife because the husband got killed by something, or vice versa, of course. But if we kind of do to the traditional family, which doesn't exist anymore, so I probably should just change this, but the wife was a stay-at-home mom watching the kids and dad was out working. If dad dies, his value, or to the family anyway, is probably going to be higher than mom who was at home, looking at lost opportunities of what, but they do take into account like, well, what does dad, let's pretend mom got killed, what does dad's life look like? Well, she worked all the time, she worked her tail off, right? She was putting diapers on the kids, making dinner, keeping the house clean, blah, blah, blah. All of that can be hired out, and so now we'd start to take that approach to valuing. Then this is for lawsuit purposes. Of course, I am a big believer in the infinite value of human life, by the way. But under those circumstances, that's how things would start to be estimated with value. Because a lawsuit for infinite dollars doesn't actually work very good for settling disputes. Okay. Let's see, I gotta watch my phone because I forgot my watch today. All right, I'll take it back. Oh, bikers. Yeah, we like to kill bikers. So what happens? What should be the proper speed limit? Right? If we drop the speed limit, do less bikers get killed? Less pedestrians get killed? Yeah. So why don't we make the speed limit 10 miles an hour everywhere? 10 miles an hour. Isn't a life valued at infinity? It's going to cost you. So we make these trade-offs all the time. So not easy answers always, but we can start to look at the trade-offs that we face with each one. All right, so here we go. Social costs of traffic accidents, death or injury, cost per vehicle mile. Death or injury, productivity loss, medical expenses, property damage, insurance administration, traffic delay. There you go. We've got it figured out. It is just 14 cents per vehicle mile. It's going to be the total cost associated with these deaths and injuries and productivity and valuing human lives and injuries. So what does that look like then? We've got airbags. Are they worth it? Here we're looking at speed. So marginal cost with airbags, initial marginal cost, so marginal cost, marginal benefit. Let's set the speed limit at 46 miles an hour. Are we going to save lives if we drop it to 40? Sure. But now the benefit is 30 and the cost is 12. We could make life better at the margin if we bumped it up to 46. What do airbags do? Save lives. So now the cost of higher speeds goes down with airbags. With the innovation of new safety equipment, then that goes down. So what do people do? And what they might be allowed to do is drive faster when we have innovations like that. So that's kind of the moral hazard aspect. Okay, questions or comments there? Vehicle miles traveled. So VMT is vehicle miles traveled. So what's going on with this table? External accident cost for different vehicles and driver ages. Who should pay higher taxes here? You. I'm looking at the, mostly I think anyway, the less than 25 years. So accident costs, so you're a little more costly. This is in that cents per mile. So if we gather data, guess who pays higher insurance rates? You guys. Now, we also should be taxing grandma and grandpa a little bit who don't belong on the road over here. We see some data that they end up ratcheting up. Pickups, minivans, SUVs, large cars, small cars. So small cars are causing some more incidents, right? You're driving a little tin can and you get into an accident, that thing crumples up. You're driving a big Lincoln Continental and you get into an accident, it's like driving a tank, right? So you're not going to cause as much damage. All right, so that's some of the things that get looked at. We could have maybe taxes differential on different cars that you buy. So people drive too much, not based on that, and so would there be some gains? So this study back from 2004 says that there'd be about 38 cents per mile driven, $9.4 billion per year. So economists kind of have fun trying to estimate the efficiency gains, right? Putting these numbers together. All right, let's do a problem. So let's see, chapter 18. Chapter 18. So let's look at number 2. Your city imposed a congestion tax of $3 per trip, and the traffic volume decreased from 120 to 80, and travel time decreased by 4 minutes. The city will reduce its head tax to ensure revenue neutrality. So let's kind of work through this one together as a class. What would need to happen here to make a traveler better off? So a person who keeps traveling, what would need to be happening here? So we got $3 per trip, traffic volume decreased, and travel time decreased. So what's the travel neutrality thing? I think that's a good place to start. Or the tax neutrality. Who's got that one figured out? And you can just talk me through it. You don't even have to calculate. We can do it as a class.
That's just where people value those 4 minutes at $3.
That's not with the tax though. So I wanted to just start with the tax neutrality. So the decreased time is going to work into their benefit at some point. But what does the tax neutrality business mean again? It's kind of what we started off today with. Tax neutrality. So you've got different types of taxes. Jacob, what's this?
Consumer producer pays in.
No, that is not it. So that is the consumer producer burden. So that's like estimating how much each one's paying. But from the government's perspective, if two tax policies are neutral, we're going to increase the tax on this side of life. What do I need to do to the tax over here to make the government in a neutral position? If they were capturing $500 on this side, then we're going to reduce, and then we do a new tax and they gain $1,200 here, well then they need to drop this one by that amount, right? That's the tax neutrality. So what is the tax collected with the new system here?
$240.
All right, so the tax revenue is $3 times our 80, so it's after the tax, gives me $240. So to make it tax neutral, what would be the city will reduce the head tax to ensure revenue neutrality. What would the head tax need to be reduced by? 240 is the total collections. So what's the tax refund per person? $2. So we've got 240 divided by what? 120. Okay, so that's the tax neutrality part of this. So the congestion tax will make a person who keeps traveling better off if deemed Alexa, that won't cost you too much here. What's happening with the traveler who keeps going? What's their equation basically of their benefit? So let's just say net benefit to the traveler, the person who keeps using the road, equals. What are the pieces of the puzzle?
They paid $3 in taxes.
Okay, they pay $3 in taxes.
They get $2 back.
They get $2 back.
They save 4 minutes.
And they save 4 minutes. So is that a plus or a minus?
Plus, minus.
It's a minus the way we were doing this here, right? And this is actually the cost the way I did this, so maybe I should, since I wrote benefit, let's just do, they get the $2 refund plus the time, 4 minutes, and then minus the $3 tax, right? So the question says, this travel will be made better off if what?
They value their 4 minutes at $1.
Okay, how much do they value their 4 minutes at, right? So what would be their per minute cost that would be required here to break even? 25. So 25 cents a minute. At 25 cents a minute, we'd have $1 here. So it'd be 2 plus 3 minus 3. So the answer to this question would be if the per minute benefit is greater than 25 cents per minute. Right? So if that's 30, then they're to the good. What about the diverted driver, the one who's not driving anymore? What's their deal? So we can kind of think of the net benefit to the person who is not using the road anymore.
It's less than 25 cents per minute.
Okay, it's less than 25 cents. So do they get the $2?
Yes.
Yes, they get the $2, but they're not driving anymore, right?
If they value the road at less than $2.
Yeah, so if they value the road at less than $2, that blank there, that's the one we're trying to solve for. In terms of how much consumer surplus they lost with their value. Okay, so that's kind of what we're doing with these problems, just kind of thinking about the different elements for each person. They had some lost consumer surplus while the other ones didn't. Let's see, how much time we got? Let's look at number 4 here. Yeah.
Is chapter 18 due before class Friday or by midnight?
Before class Friday. I think I put 11:30. 11:30 tomorrow. Suppose the initial marginal cost traveled by each car is 32 cents and the initial mileage for the typical driver is 1,000 per month. Assume the elasticity of miles driven with respect to a price is -1. Suppose the government uses a per mile tax to internalize the environmental externalities associated with car travel, so air pollution and CO2. Illustrate the effects of the tax on the equilibrium miles driven, including a new value for miles driven. All right. So I'm going to hit this one. So what do you think? Supply and demand time a little bit? Might kind of help us reason through this. So initial marginal cost per mile traveled is 32 cents per mile. So marginal cost, how would I show that? Initial marginal cost, and the initial is 1,000 miles, mileage is 1,000 miles. So we got 1,000 miles. And 32 cents.
Would that be 32 cents or would that be the 320 because it's at 1,000 miles?
A little louder, what?
Would that be 320 because that's what it is at 1,000, what your cost is at 1,000 miles?
Well, here we're just measuring per mile. Oh, the incremental element?
Yeah, because it's 32 per mile, so by 1,000 would it be 320 there?
Well, let's see. I kind of wanted you guys to reason through this. Let's just put a question mark, or is it 320? What is, assume the elasticity of miles driven with respect to price is 1. Elasticity of miles driven. So what does that mean? Elasticity, we usually do percentage change in quantity over percentage change in price, is the old-fashioned one. So what is this thing doing here? Is it still price or not? So is this, which one's miles or price, or is this 32 cents, or?
So, the percentage change in quantity is the miles.
That's the miles, right? So that would be our quantity is miles that we're doing here. So maybe we could do miles, and that equals -1. So a 1% increase in price of driving leads to a decrease of 1% change in miles. Suppose the government uses a per mile tax to internalize the environmental externalities associated with car driving. So how does that look then if we've got some sort of demand curve? We got some sort of supply curve. So where is the externality? How do we show that?
Decreasing the supply curve.
What's that?
Decreasing the supply curve.
Decreasing, so is that above or below this?
That's above.
It's above. So the social cost of putting 1,000 miles on is higher than the other costs, right? So we have something like this with the externality. So this would be the social marginal cost curve. So the externality is that amount. Okay. So illustrate the effects of the tax on equilibrium miles. So what's the tax gonna do?
Reduce miles.
Reduce miles. So kind of back to what we were doing before. There's a tax, so pollution tax or whatever we're gonna call it. So we come back to some amount here, whatever that is, something less than 1,000. Is the question asking us to come up with an exact number?
No.
No. Could we come up with an exact number?
No, it doesn't give you a tax.
Okay, so we just have a nebulous tax, so we really don't know how much it's going up by, right? But we can start to see, I didn't bring the golf club up. Some other things to remember is depending on the elasticity of demand and supply, that can have differential effects on the amount. Okay, anything else to do with this problem, you think? Which one was it with Bryce's comment here? Suppose the initial marginal cost per mile is 0.32. We go back to, let's say, this one. Any of these would probably do it. So what's going on here at these? What are these numbers? Are they 320 or 32? How about if we take this one here?
Yeah, but those are set.
So the social trip cost,
But that's set.
private trip cost.
Yeah, but that's set per trip. Where you said yours is 1,000 miles.
So is this reflect, if this was 1,000, what is this number saying?
Yeah, but that would be saying that's worth 480 for a 1,000-mile trip. You're saying it's 32 cents for 1,000 miles when it's actually.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. Is it the 1,000 miles or the 1,000th mile?
1,000 miles.
So this marginal cost curve, if we're looking at the cost on the road incrementally to that person is this height, right? That's the extra person being added to the road. Socially, though, this person had an incremental cost on other people. The externality is here, this distance. Right? So it's always the incremental cost when we're thinking about the marginal cost curve. And so on this problem, suppose the initial marginal cost per mile traveled by car is 32 cents. What do they mean by initial?
It's before the tax.
Before the tax. Is it talking about the 1,000th? Is it 32 or is it something like 320 or some other number?
Every mile's 32 cents.
It's not implying that it's varying at all.
Yeah,
It's the initial starting place. Could it be constant?
Well, in this problem, it is linear in this problem.
We've seen problems like this, right? In fact, I think that was the last one we just did. Well, that was a marginal benefit curve, I guess we had going
Yeah,
constant.
but that's per mile. If you have 1,000 down there, that's like saying at 1,000 it'd be 32 cents. Where I get.
So that's kind of the difference between average and marginal. So what all of this stuff is marginal, is what we had on the problem. So as you work through some of those, that's the dealio there. Let's just take another one. We got a couple minutes left. I think this will help you do your homework. We won't have to do the whole problem. I'll get you out of here at 1. Marginal benefit of speed is constant at 3 miles per hour. So there's the constant at 3 miles per hour. The benefit is constant, right? The marginal cost of speed is this function where S is speed in miles per hour. The legal speed is 50 miles per hour. The fine for speeding is F times the speed gap. So if you were going 75 miles an hour minus 50, it's 25 miles an hour times F gives you the fine. I guess they even give an example. For example, F for 51 would be the 2 times F for the 120. The probability of being caught and fined, so this is the Tyler problem here. The probability of being caught and fined is 0.01. So illustrate what your situation would be like with that. So that's kind of fun. When we use the probability of being caught, what do we need to do with that fine?
About the probability of it happening.
Yep, so we got to look at the expected probability. So with the expected cost of a fine, if you got caught, so the expected cost, if caught, would be equal to what was it? 0.01 is the probability of being caught, right? Is that the only expected cost? What if you're not caught? That's the full equation. What's your expected cost of being caught? What's this number over here? How much do you pay if you don't get caught? Zero. I just don't want you to forget that there's a 99% zero over here, but it's 99 times zero. And then what's the fine if you're caught? Whatever your fine is, which looks like it's variable in this problem. So that would be kind of the approach if there's some unknowns using expected values. All right, we'll call it a day there. Work on those problems tonight. We'll do some review tomorrow.
So you're saying by tomorrow grades should be completely up to date?
Yeah.
Is that going to be reflected in Blackboard or just?
In Blackboard.